boilers, they get their name from the Lancashire, the area where they was first used and invented. So there's a little bit of a difference in these Lancashire boilers because there's actually two fires in them. Traditional boilers, it would have been Cornish boilers, they would have had one fire. Lifetime Lab and the old Cork City Waterworks developed really in the midst of the Industrial Revolution from England. So we had a lot of benefits technologically wise from that era. The main benefit of having two fires as opposed to one is that one fire could be at its optimum level and operating efficiently, and then the second fire could either be built up or be brought down. Boilers boil water, water turns to steam, steam is what powers the steam engines that we have on site. So steam relies on constant pressure. So this allowed a consistent pressure to be built up, so the engines were pumping water up the hill more efficiently, but also in a consistent basis, so the pressure was maintained. When this was renovated in 2004, they wanted to stick as original as possible to the colour scheme used. And if you look back, green and red and black seem to be the predominant industrial colours in the Industrial Revolution. I'd say it's got something to do with the pigment and the lead in the paint and things like that, and that's why that was used. We like it because it just contrasts the area, and it also, if we're talking to children or adults, we can say the steam travelled up the red pipe and went down along the red pipe into the room next door, and then when we go into the engine room you can see the red pipe actually connecting to the steam engines. So it's nice visually for us to use. The one thing that the Industrial Revolution and the British Empire were able to do, they were able to build things bigger, better, faster than anyone else. Any of their projects were statements. And a classic example of that would be if you go across the river and have a look at the building. The building is very architecturally designed. The windows here would be almost cathedral-like in size. And that was a statement. It just showed how important Cork was strategically to the British Empire. Some of these facts maybe can be lost sometimes of why the British Empire invested so much in this part of Ireland, especially Cork. There's a good couple of reasons for it. Number one, strategically as a defensive area, Cork was very important to the British Empire. Cork offered a safe harbour to the ports and also a staging ground to protect the back coast of Britain. It became a supply port. We have lots of evidence of Blarney Woolen Mills, Douglas Woolen Mills, the butter, Margaret de Furton Crane supplying butter to the Empire. We have sails, ropes, gunpowder from Ballincollig, all left through the shipping lanes of Cork Harbour and went around the world. Not every town or village or even city in Ireland got a waterworks or a water pumping station. So the history dates back to the 1760s when they had an idea that they realised water and fresh water was important. The city was starting to grow. And an Italian guy was given the job of surveying, a guy called Davis Descartes. He was Italian. His inspiration would have come from Roman times, and the one thing the Romans could do was transport water. Now John Benson has, I suppose, a little bit of a hidden or maybe unacknowledged footprint across the city. John Benson, obviously these buildings that you see would have been part of his original design in the 1860s, but he also did the fountain on the Grand Parade. He's associated with some of the English market, the original Opera House. He would have done St Vincent's Church, St Luke's, and of course the original St Patrick's Bridge would have been involved in that as well. So his footprint has a huge footprint along the city. So he looked at Wicksteed's original designs and then he took them a step further. So then they started, in 1867 they started laying cast iron pipes. So that would have been, and then this building would have been a Cornish beam engine house at the time. So that would have been supplying some of the water. And that took us up then to, by 1867 then the cast iron pipes reached Collins Barracks on the north side of the city. 1904 then they renovated this building again. They actually lowered the ceiling and they widened it to fit 3 engines in. And what we have today is 3 triple expansion engines. The most striking feature of the chimney would be the layers of sandstone and limestone at its base. So that would be known as polychromatic stone effect, but here on site we just call it streaky bacon. So the limestone is fairly popular around the Cork area, and then sandstone is another abundant material as well. The legend is that when the master stonemason put in the last brick, he went up to the top, tapped it on the last brick with his trowel, and then dropped the trowel down the chimney. The triple expansion engines would have been used right up to about 1938-39. So steam power and the water turbines would have been responsible for shoving all that water up top to the reservoirs. The death knell really was the outbreak of World War II. We had coal-fired boilers, and coal isn't naturally found in any great abundance in Ireland. So the coal would have been imported from Wales or from Europe. But obviously during the war effort, all coal production was diverted to the war effort. So we couldn't get coal. Plant that's across the road at the moment was started in 1925, 1927, and that gradually then grew, and then diesel engines were put in, and then electrical engines were put in. The turbine house, as I mentioned, kept on going until 1992, and in 2002 the turbine house was recommissioned. Now it pumped clean water, it pumped actual filtered water up to the reservoirs. So the turbines now, instead of pumping water, they're recommissioned and they actually generate electricity. So the same equipment at 1888. The only difference is instead of a pump pumping water, there is a little generator at the top generating electricity. The concept of Lifetime Lab was entered into a European competition and they secured funding to renovate the building. So the idea was to put in an education and visitor centre on the themes of sustainability, and then to promote the uptake of science, technology, engineering and maths subjects for young children. It was officially opened in 2005, and I must admit that the buildings are only buildings. It's the activities and the people coming and going. It's the stories being passed down. I had a group of senior citizens last week, and I was showing them around, 20 of them, and I had a great time with them because they were able to tell me their stories. And they were able to tell me what it was like not having water in the house and going down to the fountain. And this is not so long ago. This is only 30, 40, 50 years ago that we didn't have. I mean,
it's a living memory, basically.
Living memory, and if you think about growing up in a house with a bathroom, and now most houses have 3 bathrooms. I mean, one story that was told was a guy who caught a salmon on the weir. He used to work here, and his daughters were getting ready to go for a dance in the Arcadia, but they'd only one bathroom in the house, and the fish was in the bath for the dinner on Friday, and the fish was just in the bath, just in the water, basically, just left there, and the 3 daughters were having murder because back then the dance in the Arcadia would have been the highlight would have been the highlight of the week.
Smith Barry's owned the house and the island of Fota. Arthur Hugh Smith Barry really was the person that I would be familiar with because he was quite a keen plant collector, and his daughter was Dorothy Bell, who was also a keen gardener, and she supervised the gardens then until the 1960s. What people forget about country houses is that the house and the garden were one entity. They were not separate entities. The garden provided the fruit and vegetables for the family and for some of the staff. And the garden also provided a supply of flowers in bloom for every month of the summer. Now when we think of gardens and gardeners, we have an image of some guy raking up leaves in a field. The gardener in a country house had the most important position aside from that of the butler or the leader of the household staff. To be a head gardener was to be a very important person because you liaised with the master of the house, particularly in the Victorian period. The leaders of aristocratic families competed with each other in raising exotic plants and flowers, and the head gardener worked quite closely with the head of the household to achieve success with garden specimens. Very often these were quite exotic, and the reason that they had exotic plants and flowers was because Ireland was then nominally part of the British Empire, and Irish and British plant hunters went out and brought back seeds and specimens which people then competed to bring to bloom or bring to success. The Frameyard Garden has got restored greenhouses, restored frame houses. It shows you where the gardeners' boys lived communally, and if you go to the far end of the Frameyard Garden and look through the gate, you'll see the head gardener's house, which they are talking about restoring, and it's quite a grand house. And it was a grand house because if you wanted the best gardener, you had to provide accommodation that was going to be attractive to him. A country house really was a self-sufficient entity. Nobody in the household staff really went elsewhere to buy food. Food was produced in the farmyard part. Fruit and vegetables were produced in the kitchen garden. The idea was that the house would be essentially self-sufficient. And in fact, so successful was FOTA that some of the surplus garden produce was taken to market and sold. Well, what we have to remember is before the First World War and before the 1960s, social roles were very clearly divided. There was a very strict social hierarchy. There was also a hierarchy between the sexes. Social mobility was extremely limited, in fact almost non-existent. If you were born into a certain social class, that was pretty much it, unless by luck or chance you managed to change that in some way. Now, of course, the house being a microcosm of society is going to reflect those social divisions. These social distinctions caused as many problems for the family as they did for the employees.
It began as a hunting lodge, but then it did develop and it was added to at different intervals by different members of the family. It was very common for the owners, as they went on grand tours in Europe, to bring back motifs in the new styles that were developing in Europe, and it was very much a display of their own cultural significance, or there was quite an element of one-upmanship in outdoing the neighbours, and very much the same way that people do today. They constantly upgraded the house, they constantly added new elements to it, but where they could bring back styles from the continent, that was very common, and it was all about, I suppose, social status. I suppose it was a great building in terms of learning and getting a real feel, because we had access to the whole building, getting a feel for how the house actually operated when it was essentially a family home, because quite often when you go to visit historic buildings you don't really get to do that. Obviously they can't have every tiny nook and cranny open, so you get to see some of the principal rooms or selected areas, but you don't actually get the flow of the entire building, to wander around as the people that lived in the house fully wandered around up every door and staircase, and that's something I do love about the job, because I don't think that you can really get into the atmosphere of how the buildings originally functioned as a guest at tourist attractions. It's having that background access up into the nursery, and the private accommodation and the suites, the beautiful suites that the different family members had. It does really give you much more of a sense of the building. That's what I love. I love being in at the very beginning, before they were all finished. Seeing the transformation, but really essentially getting a feel for what they were like, because then they do get closed up. They have to be. They can't have people everywhere in the house.